Hey, welcome back everybody. Happy Tuesday morning. Hope we're having a wonderful start to the day, and hopefully we're having a pretty safe one as well. We do have some pretty feisty storms kind of working on through parts of the country this morning, and that will be a theme that definitely continues this afternoon with a pretty big chance, I think, of pretty strong tornadoes in parts of Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois going into this evening. Now, I will obviously start here by saying you cannot see my face on the screen. Unfortunately, I did forget to charge my webcam battery last night, and quite honestly, also, I'm just running late and haven't had time to brush my hair, so it kind of works out well anyway. But I definitely will have the webcam back tomorrow, just again, kind of running slightly behind schedule this morning and forgot to charge that battery. So, is what it is, but I think we'll be all right. We can still talk about the weather, even if you can't see me doing the funny gestures with my hands. So, with that said, let's actually go ahead and jump right into it because, again, we do have a pretty good amount to talk about here. Now, starting off with watches, warnings, and advisories, again, all quiet here east of the Mississippi for much of today. Again, that changes a little bit, though, here up kind of to the north here, up through Illinois, Iowa, and Kansas, Missouri, rather, not Kansas. I was looking at Kansas City at the time when I said that. But anyway, yeah, definitely some strong storms up that way this afternoon, including the threat for a tornado. In fact, I'd say a couple tornadoes, probably some of which could become violent tornadoes, meaning EF2, maybe even EF3 strength, not out of the question this afternoon. With this overall setup. So we'll definitely take a look at all that in the models. But do note this morning we already do have a tornado watch in effect. And again, this is at the time of me recording this. So it's about 7:15 in the morning Eastern time. Again, this kind of yellow color on your map is that tornado watch with wind advisories and kind of these beige colors up through a big section of the country here. So definitely some active weather with this big time storm system working on through, and even back into the Rockies. Winter storm warnings for the highest elevations of Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana, as well as red flag warnings and high wind warnings for some of the Great Plains out here as that dry air is kind of funneled in behind the storm system and that wind is really picking up, could lead to some fire danger. So if you can avoid burning things this afternoon, I definitely suggest doing that. Now, radar imagery, it's not hard to find our storm at all. Here it is, right on satellite, kind of spinning away over Kansas and Nebraska. I guess really more like this if I wanted to be exact with it. And again, this is going to slowly kind of pull off towards the north and to the east throughout today and into tomorrow. And you'll notice already kind of it has that look to it this morning, if you will, with these storms kind of firing off along that dry line and along that cold front. And again, that's what brought some of those severe storms last night. Now, luckily, to my knowledge, we didn't have too many tornadoes, if any. I haven't seen anything on the Twitter feed suggesting we had a big-time tornado event. And as I talked about yesterday, we had that big-time cap in place, especially for Oklahoma, Texas, and southern Kansas. And I think that cap held up pretty well. I saw a lot of storm chasers yesterday posting how the storms really just could not fire up. And that was definitely something we talked about in the video yesterday. And sure enough, that panned out that way, which of course is a good thing. Obviously, we want to avoid any kind of destructive storms, while we can. But again, I think today is going to be quite different. We're not, unfortunately, going to really be able to use that cap to our advantage anymore. As you'll notice, these storms are already firing up and kind of working off towards the north and east with that severe criteria. And if they aren't severe yet, by the time we get into this afternoon, they sure will be. So speaking of that, we do have an enhanced risk of severe weather, and I'll tell you right off the gate here, by the time you're watching this, they may have already updated this map, and I would not be super surprised to see maybe even a moderate risk kind of in this general area circled on your map here. Now, they didn't leave much room for it to be added here on the last outlook, but again, I would not be surprised to see a couple strong tornadoes this afternoon that could be, worthy of an upgrade to moderate. Not out of the question, we will see. But either way, if you're in that orange area, in that enhanced risk, or even in that slight risk in yellow, definitely some strong storms, including tornadoes this afternoon. And then in that green area, also some thunderstorms possible, just likely a little bit less severe than areas a little bit closer to the center of our threat area. Now, speaking of those tornadoes, again, a 10% chance of a tornado within a 25-mile radius in that yellow shaded area on your map. And that area is also a hatched area, meaning, again, strong tornadoes. So EF2, EF3, maybe even higher are possible in that area this afternoon. And we'll obviously have to watch out for that throughout the day. Could easily see, again, some very impressive radar signatures that we need to watch out for. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and discuss this a little bit. Let's talk about future radar this afternoon, and let's get this into about noon time. And this is, again, about noon central. Here's that low pressure system, and here is that big cluster of storms off towards the kind of warm sector of that low pressure. Now, at this point, these storms will likely be coming strong again, a little bit more severe as, again, we get a little bit more of that daytime heating, that thunderstorm fuel to kind of really kick itself into these storms, and we'll continue to, again, feed into them and add some intensity throughout the afternoon. But that's not the big threat I'm worried about. Obviously, anyone who's in the path of this big area of storms from extreme southern Minnesota down south throughout Iowa, very gusty winds and large hail are going to be a problem. But watch what happens later this afternoon. Here we go. This is about 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Central Time. I'm going to even back this up just one frame. Again, this is about 3 p.m. Central Time, 4 p.m. Central Time. Look what happens on the backside of this storm system. The atmosphere gets reinvigorated a little bit here, gets pumped in with some more of that kind of dry line setup, and some of that sun may even be trying to come back out a little bit here, and we get a new line of storms to form. These are even a little bit more discrete, so you'll notice these form kind of into central and southern Iowa and continue northward and kind of, again, making themselves a little bit more prominent here by the time we get towards sunset. So look at these storms. Again, some of these are becoming quite discrete here on our map, and that is very worrisome. Anytime we get these discrete storms during the sunset time and this time of year in places that are prone to tornadoes, you got to keep an eye on it. So kind of a 1-2 punch here today. Again, here's that first punch with that first line, and then here's that second punch with that more discrete cell setup kind of on the back end here of that QLCS. And again, that continues to work eastbound throughout the morning hours, and especially these southern storms, kind of the ones on the south side here that are even more discrete. Got to watch for a tornado threat as we get into sunset here, into extreme eastern Iowa here, extreme northern Missouri, and into northwestern Illinois here, watching those storms move on through. The good news is, by the time we get into the overnight hours, kind of closer towards midnight, those storms die down a little bit, and we're back into just kind of more of a stratiform rain shield here, with some embedded thunder, of course, and maybe even some gusty winds and hail left over. But the severe threat dies down pretty quickly once we pass the 11 o'clock hour locally here, and then we'll get into tomorrow's severe weather threat in just a moment. Now, again, the significant tornado parameters today are also going to come in a 1-2 punch. So here's that morning round of convection. This is getting into this afternoon. Obviously, here is that round of storms. You'll notice definitely the threat for a tornado or two here through northern Missouri into southern Iowa. Our values here getting upwards of 3, and the STP values here. Again, this goes all the way up to about 9 or 10 on this scale. So a 3 is definitely important enough that we need to watch out for the potential of some tornadoes. And that threat continues up into eastern Iowa this afternoon and evening as that first line of storms move on through. And even eventually, later on this evening, these numbers really tick up. And this is as that secondary line of storms is forming. You'll notice some of these values now getting up closer to 5, maybe even 6 in places. And that is, again, quite worrisome this time of year in a location like this with a setup like this. Again, would not be surprised to see a strong tornado, maybe even a couple strong tornadoes in that enhanced risk this afternoon due to this setup. And again, if I just take a sounding here, assuming this one isn't completely contaminated and it looks all right. Again, a very kind of beautiful hodograph here. We've got very kind of big elongated hodos. We've got plenty of CAPE here in our sounding. Again, plenty of, difference from that parcels path to the wet bulb temperature, just indicating lots of lifting, lots of buoyancy in the atmosphere, and that's going to allow these storms to get strong, get tall up there, and even other values like 3 CAPE, which I'm not even going to really try to explain right now, but this is just kind of that rising motion right at the surface, quite strong as well today. SRH values very strong, so just a sounding that I'd be quite worried for a strong tornado or two to develop out of. And obviously we'll see if the weather balloons that get launched in this area kind of back this up. But nonetheless, forecast soundings are showing the potential for some quite strong storms. All right, the southern tier of this threat area today is also under the gun, although a lower threat. But I will mention, I think compared to this time yesterday, this area is, upticked a little bit in the severe weather threat. So we'll definitely talk about it here from kind of southern Missouri into Arkansas, even back down into the Texarkana area. So here we go. This is going to be a place that it really takes a while. Now, this afternoon, maybe just some light showers work on through. Kind of stays that way till about sunset, maybe even after sunset a little bit. At this point, finally some storms kind of begin to fire in here, kind of in this circled area on your map from Little Rock up through St. Louis, Some of these storms likely not nearly as strong as the ones up into Iowa, Illinois, excuse me. But these storms could be feisty as well and could get quite strong during the overnight hours, about 10 o'clock Central Time here. Again, a nice little line of storms forming here from southern Illinois all the way back down towards the Texarkana area. Main threat here will be strong straight line winds, some embedded hail, but also cannot rule out a tornado or two. And again, as we move this ahead into the overnight, this really congeals into a pretty strong line of storms that rolls on through western Tennessee, there through Memphis, the Paducah area, getting in on some of those storms, even into northern Mississippi before clearing out by tomorrow morning here, and we're in the clear once again. Significant tornado parameter values in this area today, though, are also noteworthy. So this afternoon, again, they start to uptick across Arkansas and southern Missouri, but really begin to uptick during the evening hours here, about the time the sun is setting. And if we just take a sounding over Little Rock around this time, you'll notice this is, again, quite an impressive sounding. And this is kind of new. The models yesterday were not quite as excited about this area, but nonetheless, high enough here that we could see some rotating storms. Again, hodograph is worthy enough of it. Thermodynamic profile is okay. I will say, 3 Cape is a little bit lower than you'd maybe like to see, and some of these other parameters also could be slightly higher, but cannot rule out a tornado here in the southern end of this threat at all today as well. But either way, definitely likely to see some strong winds and a little bit of hail as well. Just not nearly as big of a threat, I think, as further up north, kind of where we were talking about earlier. All right, that gets us into tomorrow, where once again, severe weather is on the horizon, and in fact, we have a slight risk issued for cities like Detroit, Cleveland, Columbus, Indianapolis, and areas further south there through Louisville, down towards Nashville, and even into northern Alabama and Mississippi could see a couple strong storms tomorrow, and that does include the threat of a tornado or two, specifically here from Detroit back towards northern Ohio and into northeastern Indiana, but even back down towards the Ohio River Valley, towards Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Columbus, and even out towards Cleveland. Could see a couple tornadoes as well tomorrow. Now, I think tornado strength tomorrow will be a little bit less, likely to see significant tornadoes, but still a threat nonetheless. So let's go ahead and time this out for you a little bit, starting in our Wednesday morning. Now, tomorrow morning, rain is going to be easy to come by here from the UP of Michigan all the way back down towards Ohio and into the Appalachia chain. Even into the Western Carolinas could see some rain tomorrow morning. So definitely prepare for that as you're waking up and maybe getting out the door. Could see some showers, and those slowly work eastbound throughout the day. So this is getting to about noon Eastern time. Still some scattered showers now into the mid-Atlantic, into the southeast here, all the way back up into, again, the Great Lakes region. But more importantly, watch where this low pressure is and watch where kind of that line of storms now begins to develop along that low pressure. This is where we're going to have more of a feisty threat of severe storms, and you'll notice that develops pretty quickly here, and even into tomorrow afternoon and evening, some more discrete cells kind of develop up here into Ohio, and I'll zoom in on this in just a moment, but I did want to show you either way tomorrow afternoon, if you're not in that severe weather threat, still some showery weather here up into the northeast, the mid-Atlantic, the southeast, and even up into portions of New England. Also noticing tomorrow afternoon, a couple storms could fire further to the south as well. Again, this entire area kind of into here is also under the gun for severe storms, just a little more conditional here. Not quite sure if we'll have the lift to support these storms to develop and sustain themselves, but if they do, again, they could become quite strong to severe. And by the time we're getting into overnight and into about the midnight hour here, maybe a little bit after overnight Wednesday into Thursday, again, severe weather threats should be dying down at this point, but still rainy up into the Midwest and into the Northeast, and even into the Mid-Atlantic and portions of the Southeast could see some showers and storms overnight Wednesday as the storm slowly pulls northward, and that sets the stage for our next storm system already developing back towards Kansas, Colorado, to kind of begin its trek eastbound, really starting Thursday afternoon. But with that said, let's go ahead and dive into the more pronounced severe weather threat tomorrow afternoon a little bit more here. So here we go. Again, that morning rain kind of moves on through. By the time we hit the afternoon, another area of storms likely to develop here closer towards that low pressure where we have that lift in place. And by the time we get later on into the afternoon, look at these storms kind of developing and bubbling up kind of in this popcorn shape here. These, again, could produce a couple tornadoes, but straight line winds and large hail are the biggest threats that we need to watch out for here Wednesday afternoon. And again, those track through portions of western Ohio here, eastern Indiana, and the southern half of Michigan, kind of on the mitten there. And those could even try to work eastbound into places like Cleveland and maybe even into Pittsburgh during the overnight hours where excuse me, we'll have to see if they still are holding on to any of that severe level criteria. But tornado parameters tomorrow, again, are not zero by any means. Definitely enough we need to watch, especially here along the southern end, where some of these storms might have a little bit more instability and become a little bit more isolated. If I take a sounding here in Ohio tomorrow afternoon, again, definitely, well, that one's a little contaminated. Let me try maybe somewhere else. Yeah, that'll work. Again, hodograph is definitely quite curved here, supportive of a couple tornadoes. Cape values in that 1 to 2,000 range, even closer to 2,000, I would say. And, definitely good enough to produce a couple tornadoes here. 3 Cape, though, is quite low, so that could become a little bit of an inhibiting factor. But nonetheless, again, could see a couple tornadoes tomorrow afternoon in this part of the country as well, before, again, clearing out and those ingredients die out overnight Wednesday into Thursday, which, speaking of Thursday, here we go. We'll do it all again. Another area of severe weather, slight risk from Paducah back down towards Little Rock once again and into southeastern Oklahoma. And again, a marginal risk stretching from Ohio all the way down towards the Rio Grande there into south central Texas. So a lot of folks having a chance for some strong storms once again on Thursday afternoon. And just to kind of show you a little bit of a sneak peek at this, basically the setup is low pressure developing here along a pretty feisty cold front here that is really going to cool things down later this weekend and into early next week, but we'll talk about that in a second. But either way, low pressure here forming along this area, slowly kind of working eastbound during the overnight of Thursday and Friday, but because of that, we could get some storms to develop anywhere in this circled area. All hazards on the table here as well, but especially straight line winds, I think, are going to be the biggest threat, as well as some large hail, especially with that cold air quickly kind of chasing up with these storms. And that will not be the end of it. By the time we get into Friday afternoon, this storm system slowly works eastbound, could bring some thunderstorms into portions of the Ohio River Valley Friday. And by the time we get into this weekend, another area of low pressure develops back towards Texas. Going into Saturday, a lot of our models are now hinting at this, and this is slowly going to track eastbound, maybe even bringing some snow up to the northern tier and to portions of the Great Plains, but also adding another severe weather threat this weekend into the Gulf Coast and into the southeast before finally that clears on out into early next week, and we really cool down pretty big time on the back end. So kind of just overall severe weather chances with our European ensemble members Thursday afternoon and evening. Again, that highlighted area that we mentioned for Thursday that the Storm Prediction Center has already talked about. But also going into Friday afternoon. Again, could see a couple strong storms maybe into the Ohio River Valley, into the Appalachia chain. But I think really Saturday afternoon and Sunday, we really once again uptick these chances through the southern tier of the country from Texas all the way over towards the Carolinas eventually on Sunday before again finally clearing out early next week. Our GFS ensemble members kind of agree with the same thing, even a little bit higher numbers here for Thursday afternoon through southern Missouri into northern Arkansas, and eventually into Friday afternoon. Again, still some of those storm chances from Nashville over towards kind of Pikeville, Kentucky, and into West Virginia, and could even stay that way overnight before getting into Saturday afternoon. Again, reinvigorating these severe weather chances from the Carolinas all the way over towards Texas, and that could again keep up even into Sunday afternoon and evening along the Gulf Coast before finally clearing out next week. And the main reason for that clearing out is this. Again, very hot temperatures today, well above average. That continues into Wednesday afternoon, continues into Thursday afternoon, but look what happens. Look at this big gradient of hot versus cold air and this big pocket of Canadian air slowly sliding south and eastbound starting Thursday afternoon. Again, that's going to help to spark these storms, but it's also going to help by the time we get into Sunday afternoon and Monday afternoon especially to bring much cooler temperatures through a big section of the eastern half of the country. So if you're not a fan of this summertime weather that we're looking at right now, don't fret, because we are definitely going to have nicer weather on the horizon here by the time we get into early next week. Much more early spring-like weather compared to maybe the summer-like weather that we have been experiencing right now. So again, big time cool down on the way. Alrighty, with that said, I appreciate you hanging in there with me again. I'm sorry about the webcam. I'll definitely make sure to charge it up tonight and get back at it with tomorrow's video. But with that said, have a great rest of your day. Stay safe out there, and I will see you all tomorrow.